Damn. Go.
Alright guys, how's it going? It's the Eastbayanglers. Today I want to talk about trout fishing, but we're not just talking about trout fishing in California or in a particular area of California. We're going to be talking about trout fishing nationwide, and we're also going to be talking about trout fishing throughout the world. The reason we're going to do that is I just want to touch base with the fact that the rainbow trout specifically has been planted throughout most of the world and is the most popular game fish that people fish for to eat. I think bass fishing would be the most popular sport fishing fish for freshwater, but it's frowned upon to keep bass, and they don't taste nearly as good as trout. So let's talk about rainbow trout fishing. For the most part, the planted trout that they're planting throughout the world are rainbow trout. They're not, planting browns in California. They're not planting a lot of different species of trout. There's quite a few out there, but they're not planting Goldens, obviously, or, to my knowledge, in certain states, they're not planting Browns or Cuts or different things like that. So each state's a little different. Each area in the world is a little different as far as what they have. But we're going to talk specifically about rainbow trout in general, because that's the most common planted trout. Now, let's keep in mind that rainbow trout are a bit easier to catch and fool than their cousins and brothers in the family. Brown trout are especially more difficult to catch, for example, than a rainbow. Alright, we're going to move on. Basically, rainbow trout are bred for sport and food, but mainly for food. They inhabit lakes and streams on every continent except Antarctica. Many anglers find that planted trout can be easily spooked. This has a lot to do. So planted trout can really easily be spooked. And the reason for this has a lot to do with the way they're bred in the hatcheries. Now, one of the more interesting things about rainbow trout is that they can survive in a wide variety of environments and habitats. Rainbow trout can thrive in a variety of waters and can find suitable habitat in almost any conditions. As long as there is a seasonal or an annual creek, inlet, river, something that feeds it. But for the most part, alright guys, so all that being said, I can't stress enough, how important habitat is, how the fish relate to it, and therefore how important it is when you're trout fishing. Alright guys, so it's pretty basic. Planted trout are accustomed to eating brown food pellets. Now, find in the pattern. Certain colors, certain baits, certain particular brands, sometimes that matters. Sometimes the leader length makes all the difference. Whether it's 12 inches, 24 inches, 18, 36 inches, you know, I'm telling you, your leader length has a lot to do with you getting bit or not getting bit. Right bait, right location, fish are active, they're there, and you're not getting bit. Sometimes it has nothing to do with anything except leader. You know, obviously the type of line you're going to use is going to be key. Try to go light. These fish, these planted trout, don't have teeth like wild trout, so you're not going to have to worry about breaking off. You can go lighter. These planted trout seem to be a bit more sensitive in all regard. Now your presentation's also important. You know, just remember that, how you're presenting the bait, and you know, your setup as far as, are you using a split shot, a sliding Carolina rig setup, those kinds of things. Now it's important to remember that freshly stocked trout, they swim in schools, and most often will swim counterclockwise. This is really important, especially if you're in a boat, but on the bank it's equally important for a variety of reasons. Obviously, it's just going to allow you to try and present your bait where the schools seem to continue to circle back again and again. Now, if you have the option, you know, you can also troll or drift into the school with a variety of different leader lengths on your rods, and find the leader length that works best, and then switch all your rods to it. And at that point you can obviously work a few different baits, figure out which bait works best, and then that way by your second or third pass you guys have the right bait, the right leader length, the right area, pretty much down. You have it down. Alright, you know, here's the thing. Certain anglers, they swear by certain colors. I think it's important to have your own experiences, experiment, play around, and play around's the wrong word. Experiment. You know, take different baits. Take a rooster tail, a woolly booger, a nymph, and see what works. It's not always necessary to just throw out a bait. Although bait does work, although power bait works good, and marshmallows and salmon eggs and all that, there are other baits, reaction baits, that work really well. But finding out what works is, you know, that's the struggle. That's also the fun when you figure it out. Obviously, there's like you know, bit of an accomplishment because sometimes it'll change day to day. Sometimes the pattern might stay the same for a few weeks, if you're lucky, a little bit longer, and then it changes. But let's talk about rainbow trout, planted rainbow trout. Depending on the time of year that you're fishing for them, you know, that's so important. That's key. So if you're fishing for them in the summer, trout are going to be deeper. You're going to want to fish where the creeks or the rivers, where that colder water is feeding in. There's more oxygen there, and obviously the water temps are lower. So in the summertime, that's where they're going to be. In the wintertime, in the summertime, they're also going to be in channels and in deep water in general, off ledges or on just you know, things like that. They might be in rocks in deep water buried. But in the winter, it's completely the opposite. You know, anything's game. They're not going to be in the channel. They're not going to be well, they might be around the creek. So yeah, but they're not going to be in the channel, and they're not going to be in as deep a water. They're going to be in relatively shallow water compared to summer. So obviously, one's an extreme hot situation, you know, with the heat. One's extreme cold for that time of year. So the time of year you're going to go fishing for these fish is really important. The next thing I want to mention is that, remember, alright guys, remember, planted trout, they are stocked year round. Most of the places annually stock. There are some other places though that can't support enough oxygen, or the fishery's not healthy enough, or there's just not any inlets or creeks where they can't continue to plant past late spring. The fish won't survive. So there are places that are seasonally planting, and you're going to have to figure out for your local area who's annual, who's seasonal. Alright guys, so it is what it is. For the most part, a planted rainbow trout on any given day is going to be much more sensitive than a wild trout. For example, they're not as aggressive. They sometimes might not fight as hard. That has a lot to do with the fact that they have cut tails when they're initially put in, and that really takes away their ability to give the fullest fight. I'm big on using a strike indicator when I'm fishing for the planted trout because they're so sensitive. A bobber is a strike indicator, guys. I like to put a snap swivel on top of the bobber, and strike indicator is just another word, fancy word for bobber. When fishing for planted trout, guys, just remember, you know, these fish, they swim for the most part counterclockwise. Alright guys, so the planted trout behavior, it's pretty consistent. If they plant at your local lake, a few days later, the fish are in a particular area. They will likely be in that area the next plant as well, and the plant after that. So once you learn that body of water, it's pretty easy to be consistent and catch fish consistently. Each lake has proven spots. You're going to know they're good spots. Usually you got to get there early. There's competition with other anglers to get that spot, because of the fact that they're consistently catching fish there. So that's one thing to look for. I like to use, when fishing for planted trout, a lot of Berkeley power bait dough, power eggs, mice tails, soft plastic lures, hard lures like metal lures, tubes, and plastic craws. For example, 1/64 ounce tubes, 1/32 ounce tubes are pretty good pre-rigged trout baits. I like inline spinners. Also a big fan of spoons, Blue Fox, Panther Martins. Shout out to Meps, Thomas, Castmasters, Super Dupers, Little Cleos, 1/4 ounce to 1 ounce really are the best. Don't be afraid to throw bigger baits. Just downsize those hooks. Take those hooks out, those stock hooks, and downsize them to the size of hooks that are on a 1/4 ounce Castmaster, for example. Throw those stock hooks the size on a 1/4 ounce Castmaster on a 1 ounce Castmaster, especially in lakes that water clarity is poor or you've got stained water. Those bigger spoons, spinners, etc., they put off a lot more flash, and those fish sometimes they need that extra flash to find that bait. So it makes all the difference sometimes between you catching a few or catching nothing. Rapalas, jointed rapalas, small countdowns, floaters, shad wraps. I mean, these are all great Rapala lures. I like the ones, the threes, the fives, the sevens, but you can go all the way up to the 13s. Those are pretty popular. Um, there's flashers, but let's talk about what kind of flashers, guys. Usually you want to use Dave Davis's, you want to use Lure Jensen's, you want to have a 12 to a 30-inch leader. Sometimes you just want a night crawler. Sometimes you want to put lures like Apex's, Hoochies, Needlefish, things of that nature all work really well, but you can pretty much do anything. And let the fish tell you. I mean, if you rig something up and you don't get bit, you know that area, that lake, and that's a proven area. You just caught fish there yesterday with a different lure. That's another thing is when the bite's on, not a lot of people do this, but that's the time to try the bait you haven't tried out. When the bite's good, because if you can't get them when the bite's good, you might want to put that lure aside for good. You don't want to spend 9 hours or 20 hours fishing that bait when it's slow and then shake your head and say, well, it was slow. You want to fish it for an hour or 30 minutes when the bite's hot and then say, man, I didn't catch nothing. This bait's not very good. So, planted trout, are accustomed to a particular um, all right, guys. So, planet trout are accustomed to certain things, and a lot of times, when they dispense the food pellets, they're thrown in, and I don't know whether that relates or not, but trout fishing for planted trout on rainy days is absolutely phenomenal. Not only are you one of the only, if not the only anglers on that body of water, so your bait pretty much is one of the only baits in the water, but it just seems to make these fish extremely active. They really get going. I have honestly had some of my best, probably my best days, hands down, trout fishing, and not just had my best days, had more days 10 to 1 in the rain, where I caught big trout, limits of trout, or dozens of trout in the rain. Alright guys, and I think the rain was a huge factor in that. I still do. I love to fish in the rain. Some people tell me, oh, the rain this, the rain that. Well, you know, obviously what you're doing isn't working, but what I'm doing is working in the rain. So guys, stay tuned. I'm going to do some more videos. This is just a basic instructional video, an informative video talking about planted trout in depth, a little bit unlike a lot of people that are going to sit there and they're going to try to sell you this or sell you that. I'm just trying to tell you what works, you know, break it down, make it simple, and let you know wherever you are in the world what the habits are of planet trout and basic tendencies of these fish, make it easier for you to catch these fish, get you on more fish in general. Stay tuned guys for more videos. Thanks for watching.